Hey, thanks for joining us in Moving Conversations. Before we get on with the show, listen, I want to remind you that I'm going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona on April 12th and 13th with my post-rehab summit. So if you're all interested in learning more about post-rehabilitation, low back pain, knee pain, hip pain, shoulder pain, all that kind of stuff, how to manage clients with those type of conditions, that's really the best place to find some great practical application on all of that. So Post-Rehab Summit, if you go to the website, thefirmbodypilates.com and hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner that says Post-Rehab Summit, that's where all the information is. Check it out, and I hope to see you all there. And now, on to the show. Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How are you today?
Very well, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing good. I apologize to everyone. Froggy throat. It is incredibly cold on the East Coast, and the dryness. When you walk into a room and look at the humidistat and see it in the single digits, you know it's dry. Yeah.
Right.
I've got humidifiers going in every room, and we can't get above 15 or 16%. So it's affected my throat. So if I sound a little froggy, you know what's up. Hopefully I won't lose my voice. That's all I hope for. So yeah, but other than that, everything's going good. How about you?
Good. It's spring is springing. It's almost going to be almost 70, I think, in the next couple of days. So, I'm in California. So yeah, it's springy.
Yeah. Oh, it is right now. I'm looking at my watch. It is, we made it to 32. We're at freezing right now. So we're at 32, but the wind chill is 21. So yeah, it's a little chilly here. It's going to warm up this weekend. It'll get to mid 40s. So we'll be happy about that. Can't wait. Can't wait for spring. Can't wait for spring. Well, we had a wonderful discussion last time, you and I, about LGP1s, and we did a little bit of an update on that. And if you haven't listened to it, please go back. It's in our history. It happened a week or two ago. And we thought
Brian, GLP. You're getting a little LGP there.
Oh, I say LGP? Sorry. GLP-1. Oh, man.
There we go. Get our acronyms.
That's much better.
Get our 3-letter acronyms together.
I'm telling you, man. I need to get a little more sleep, don't I? All right. So, yes, we did our GLP-1 episode, an update. And what came up was sarcopenia. A couple of times we started talking about that because that's the big thing that we saw as a major side effect of taking these drugs. And so we thought, you know what, we haven't really discussed that in depth. So why don't we jump into that and discuss it? And keeping in mind now, we are fitness professionals. We are not physicians. We're not nutritionists. We're not on that side of things. We are secondary, in the medical field. We're not primary.
Yes.
So we're going to stay in our lane. The things that we're going to recommend are things that are general recommendations and also based on all of the studies that we've been reading and things like that. So just wanted to go and say we are going to stay in our lane and go with our scope of practice so everybody realizes that. But before we get started on that, do us a favor, hit the like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it on the platform of your choice. Hit the like, subscribe, comment, share, do all of those things. We really appreciate it. Also, Instagram, Moving Convos. Check us out there, and Moving Conversations. On Facebook, movingconvos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us, and we'd really appreciate it. All right, you ready to dive into sarcopenia?
I am ready.
All right, so let's do it.
The first thing we were thinking about was, what is sarcopenia? So let's just define it, and also contrast it with muscle atrophy. So sarcopenia is actual loss of muscle fibers. So it's like you have, it's not just loss of muscle activation or the strength or size of the muscle fibers, it's actual loss of muscle fibers. Muscle atrophy is like you still got the same number of fibers, they're just not doing as much. right? So sarcopenia is a little more serious, a little harder to recover from, and something that can have over time, long-term negative impacts in terms of function and ability to do everyday life. So those are kind of sarcopenia and muscle atrophy. And we want to focus a lot more on sarcopenia in this particular episode.
When we talk about hypertrophy or sarcopenia, keep one thing in mind. We cannot gain after a certain age. You do not gain additional muscle fibers. What you got is what you got. They get bigger. They get smaller.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about with atrophy and hypertrophy, is we're talking about enlarging or shrinking of that. And some of that is natural with age. We're going to lose some muscle as we age. But sarcopenia is definitely the loss of muscle fibers. And when they're gone, they're gone. A lot of times they're very, very difficult to reestablish those. So just keep that in mind. Sarcopenia can be something that's a lot more serious and something we really have to take into account, especially with our older population and now these people on the GLP-1s.
So we talked about last time, to bring that back, was we talked about how with GLP-1s, if you lose a lot of fat, particularly quickly, you lose a lot of weight, I should say, you lose both fat and muscle at the same time, and you actually lose muscle fibers. So in either case, like whether it's GLP-1s or whether it's age, so age-related sarcopenia, there's not a lot of really good research. When I was reading on it, it's like 8 to 15% of the population has some version of it. It gets worse as you get older. And they were talking about fairly serious situations where you can't get up, you can't get off the floor, you can't get out of a chair, more serious loss of muscle strength. But sarcopenia with weight loss is different because that can happen in a much younger population. And in reading about it, I think both of us were like, whoa, it can take a long time to get that strength back.
Yep. And what's interesting is, if you think about it, people who take the GLP-1s, and I'm going to make a gross generalization, okay? But a lot of those people are not people who are going to feel comfortable in gyms. They're not necessarily people who have been fitness freaks their whole life. So weightlifting may not be part of their lifestyle before they started taking the drugs in general. And I think I told you that there are groups and whatnot online on Facebook and things like that, when they'll literally say, what can I do besides exercise? What can I do besides exercise to lose more weight? I've lost a lot, but now I want to lose more. What can I do besides exercise? They don't want to. Exercise is boring. Let's face it. We love it because we're in this field.
But we're nerds. That's what we love. Yeah.
We love this weird stuff. We love to move our bodies, but a lot of people don't. And when we talk about people who are obese, a lot of them aren't exercising as much as they should. Some are very healthy, even though they're larger. But a gross generalization, a lot of them don't put exercise to the forefront of their lifestyle. And we're going to see that with the GLP-1s, but we're also going to see that in the elderly population. Less than 9% of people over the age of 70 or 75 lift weights at all. 9%, that's very small amount of people. So you can see why these are two groups. If they're not exercising and they're losing weight, and as we age, they say we lose anywhere from, a pound of muscle per year for men. I think in a decade, anywhere from 1 to 5 or 6 pounds of muscle mass over the age of 50. And for women, it's about 3%-ish per decade of loss over the age of like 50 to 60, 65. So when you see that, that's a natural progression as we age. You're going to have some reduction in muscle mass. And again, that's atrophy. This is a specific type of atrophy. So when we see sarcopenia, you can often see they get physically smaller.
Yeah.
And you can literally see it. And I remember the first time I saw this, a quick story, I was at the University of Hawaii and I was working in the fitness industry, but I was also going to the basketball games, and the student section was literally right next to the band, and the band director and us became somewhat friends. We were so close, we were kind of part of the band. We'd bring out kazoos and we'd, join in and things. And, didn't even know her name, but, always said hi, very friendly. Well, season finished. Before the next season, she came to me professionally. And I recognized her, she recognized me, but I only recognized her a little bit because she had lost about 75 pounds.
Oof.
She had become emaciated. She was about 85 to 90 pounds.
Whoa.
And she had lost almost all muscle mass.
Whoa.
I mean, she was one of these people that you would call, I hate to use the term, but sort of a thin fat person. She had a relatively high body fat percentage for her size. She was close to 30% body fat, but she had lost a lot of muscle. And again, hers was also eating disorder. So putting that aside, when I saw how emaciated she was, it was actually very scary. And that was one of the first times that I actually saw in person what it was like for someone to lose weight so rapidly, because she lost it in a 6-month period or something. It was very, very radical. And she became, she could barely get out of a chair. And this is a woman who was in her 30s and she could barely get out of a chair. She could barely do anything. She'd lost that much muscle. So it can happen when you lose a lot of weight in a relatively short amount of time. It can happen.
Yowza. That's quite a story.
Yeah.
And I've been talking to a number of my instructors and friends and stuff about the GLP-1s and that kind of thing. And one of them came up to me. She didn't even know I'd been talking about it on this show yet because it hasn't come out yet. But she's like, hey, you have clients on this? I noticed that my clients that are on it, they're just a whole lot weaker. Like I'm going down in springs, I'm decreasing resistance. They don't seem to have the stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's muscle loss. That's muscle loss, like right there. So when we're thinking about this, it's like, what can we do about it? And there's a lot of things to do about it. And there's a lot of ways to build up muscle. And again, you may not gain more fibers, but you can certainly make the fibers you have stronger, right? That's what we do with weight training. That's what we do with resistance training. That's what we do with all the work that we do is we take the fibers that you've got and we try to make them work a little bit better. So that's certainly something we can always do. But just a reminder too, something we say a lot on this show that just atrophy, for example. So, being immobilized for 3 weeks with a younger, healthier body, it will often take as much as 3 times whatever amount of immobilization you had to regain the same amount of strength. And that's with atrophy. With sarcopenia, that can be worse because you've actually lost that many fibers. So with all these situations, it's like you've got to really look at kind of a long time horizon. Whether it's a weight loss situation, whether it's like a post-surgery situation, whether it's a pathological situation where they lose a lot of weight or muscle mass for some other reason, or whether they're just old. Like in all those circumstances, kind of look at a year at a time. Like, okay, over this year, we're going to try to increase these skills this much, and then the next year, we're going to try to keep working on them this much. Like it's really it's not what most people want in terms of exercise. They don't want to look at the long picture. Most people say, what can I do in 3 weeks that'll get me like everything I need? Like, it's not going to work that way.
Something else to think about, and I want to break this into 2 different parts and discuss it this way. You have clients who are on the GLP-1s. There's preventative loss. How do we prevent them from losing the muscle that they have? So there's a preventative. We're also going to have those people who are either older adults who come to us who need to gain more muscle, who have been diagnosed with sarcopenia, or maybe a client, a brand new client who's been on GLP-1s for the last a year or so and has lost 50 or 60 pounds and they're experiencing a lot of. So we need to think about things from those 2 standpoints, because if you have an existing client, you want to prevent as much of that loss as possible. And I think that's important for anybody who is losing weight, either with or without the help of medication. Because if they're trying to lose weight and let's say they were eating 4,000 calories a day and they go down to 1,800 calories a day, well, guess what? They're going to have a rapid weight loss, probably. They're going to lose fairly quickly. And guess what? It's our job to help them not lose muscle as much. Some of it is going to happen, But it's our job to really prevent that, and especially with people who are on these newer medications.
One of the things that I was looking at too, which was, well, I don't know, this whole thing is slightly disturbing, to be honest with you, was that there's, when people have sarcopenia and obesity, it really increases the likelihood of all kinds of disability.
All of them. Yep.
Right. So if you have somebody, for example, who is obese, who goes on a GLP-1, who then, loses a lot of weight, but maybe they're still obese, they just lost a lot of weight, and they've got sarcopenia now and obesity, that just makes it much harder for them oftentimes to regain, even harder to regain the strength, to be able to do sort of daily function. So
Yeah.
I know this is not a pleasant topic in a way, but it's also real. And when I'm thinking about a lot of my older clients, one of the things that they use as a test, and these are just good things for you to kind of know, like you may or may not use these tests, but one is like the get up and go test. Like how
Yep.
long does it take somebody to get up from a chair, walk 10 feet or whatever, walk across the room, come back and sit down? What is somebody's normal walking pace? Can somebody get up and down from a chair without using their arms? How many times in like a minute? Like these are just a variety of different tests that kind of are a very, very gross, very rough gauge of their actual kind of functional capabilities and strength. And there's all kinds of, those are useful because you can look on charts and see what that means in terms of where they are on a gradient of strength.
Yeah, and that has been used. That test has been used in seniors for decades and decades, which is great.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful way to look at how much muscle that someone has lost, or strength in general, how much strength. The three that physicians are starting to use now for diagnosis of sarcopenia, it looks like, is hand grip strength. So they're using a dynamometer. So they're looking at hand grip strength because that's showing that a lack of or a loss of strength there is transferred throughout the body, obviously. So you don't have as much strength there, you're probably not going to have as much strength elsewhere. So there's that. There's, gait speed, which the get up and go really does show, as well as the stand and sit. Those three are things that don't require that much. I mean, yes, grip strength, you need a dynamometer, but that's like $30. But the other two, you need a chair. You need a distance of a hallway. I mean, those
maybe
things.
A stopwatch.
and at a timer, everybody's phone has that. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that we can do and make as part of our assessment for especially someone over the age of 60 or 65. I was watching a client yesterday who I've known he and his family since I got to Washington, D.C. We're talking 20 some odd years. Okay. And I was really noticing how he was moving. He works with one of my other instructors here, and how he has an incredible, he's 20 years older. So now he's in his 70s, late 70s. So the way he's moving, he moves a lot slower. He's a lot more robotic. He doesn't turn gracefully. He does that robotic, stop and then shuffle his feet to the side and then start to walk again. And I was watching this thinking, oh my gosh, wow, yeah. Because I met him when he was my age.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that and thinking, yeah, no, I'm not looking in the mirror here. I'm not looking at the future. I need to keep my body moving because attorney, a lot of desk work, didn't exercise as much. That can happen. So just keep that in mind when a client does come into you who is, over the age of 60. This is a good thing to start doing with them. Test them. How many times can they get up and down out of a chair? How fast can they walk the hall comfortably? And put something at the end of the hall and make them go around it and come back. How do they turn around it? Are they graceful, or is that a sticking point? Small things like that, believe it or not, are huge, and they're huge indicators for us. And they're measurable, which is nice because we can actually have something quantitative that we can say, look, 6 weeks ago, you did this. Now you're doing this. So we can show improvement. Or if we see a lack of improvement, we can say what's wrong, what's going on, and adjust along the way.
Exactly. So for you guys out there, we're working with these clients of whatever kind, whether it's age-related sarcopenia or whether it's weight loss-related sarcopenia. It's like get them moving, right? Yep. And one thing that I say a lot, especially for people in the Pilates studio, is we need to keep increasing resistance, or at least adjusting resistance, or adjusting the challenge of the exercises. In a weightlifting environment, it's a lot easier. Like, I do 5 pounds this week, I do 7.5 pounds next week. Like, that's an easier measure. In Pilates, it's harder. Like, yes, you can add more springs, which to a certain extent that will do something. If you're doing footwork on more springs, that will be more work going on there. But it's also choosing the exercises. So, instead of doing footwork, doing knee stretch. Knee stretch is going to be a whole lot more whole body and a little bit more strenuous, if that's appropriate for that client. And so some of it is not just looking at resistance in our world, but also looking at the challenge of the exercise to the whole body. Because it isn't as straightforward in Pilates. And that's just something to think about in terms of how do you keep progressing somebody in terms of strength and resistance in that environment.
Yeah. And that's very, very important. Let's face it, we all know the person who joins Pilates because they want to relax and they think it's not going to be that hard. And it's incredibly hard, but they're not really lifting a lot of weight, depending on the instructor, and what springs they're using. For a lot of people, they're not lifting a lot of weight. It's not like, here's a kettlebell, pick this up, carry this over there. It's not that sort of weight training. And guess what? People do need that for functionality of life. We need to be able to lift something heavy and carry it into the other room. We need to be able to take something out of the car. Grandparents need to be able to take the car seat with a child in it, in and out of the back seat. There's things like that we need to make sure that they have the functionality. So adding that in, no matter what you're teaching, even if you're doing yoga, even if you're doing whatever you're teaching, adding that component in is very important.
Yeah, one of the things that I tend to do in my reformer classes, particularly, is I start standing and I end standing. Nice. And I started doing that because for a long time I didn't. I would, people would come in, we do a little bit of a warm up, something, and then we, lie down and do footwork. And what I realized was, and this was actually when I started teaching Coraline, which is an upright exercise, you're basically standing and moving, was all those things that looked great lying down and seated and side lying and all the positions are on the reformer, they went to upright and it was not translating to standing. It was not necessarily translating to that. So, I just have them doing, and I have them doing dumb things. Like I'll have them do basically sit to stand, either if they're deconditioned, I'll have them do it just on the foot bar. So they just I call them touch and goes, butt down, stand up, butt down, stand up. If they're a little stronger, then they do it on the 14-inch reformer, right? All the way down, all the way up, all the way down, all the way up. And we start and we end with those for all of my clients who are of that age, or even approaching that age. Honestly, I tried to start that in like the 50s because I know these guys are going to need more as they get older. And I also have really encouraged a lot of my clients, like my long-term Pilates clients, who have really accommodated, like their bodies can tolerate everything in the Pilates environment without much strain. That kind of says they're not getting more muscle building. If they can do like a full workout and really not be sore and really not feel like gentle effort, but not a lot of effort, then I'll say, hey, we need to send you off to my friend Brian or whoever I've got in the other room to do some weight training and encourage them to take that to another level and really get a little bit sore, get a little bit more effort going through the limbs and through the body. Because I think that's really important in terms of understanding where they are and how you can keep moving them ahead.
And there doesn't have to be an either or. We're complementary services.
Yeah.
They should dovetail into one another because there's a lot of things that you can do in a Pilates environment that you can't really do in the fitness environment and vice versa. And they're not designed for that. So I have every single client squat. That is something I work toward because that is, I've told you this story before. I had a professor who said, squatting is the worst exercise you can possibly do with an older person. And I raised my hand and I said, how do you get him off the toilet? And you could just see he stuttered and just stopped. And you can see he thought about it. He said, you know what? That might be the best exercise, the most functional exercise you can teach him. And I said, we need to be able to get out of a chair. We need to be able to get out of the car, off the toilet. I've had clients stuck on the toilet before, and it's unbelievably embarrassing. Some houses have really low toilets to the ground, some higher ones. You get used to the high ones, you sit on a low one, and suddenly you're like, uh-oh, what am I going to do now? It's embarrassing.
Right.
You know,
Everybody
it's
wants to go,
embarrassing.
help from the bathroom.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
not a good day.
That's not a good day for you. So I have every one of them squat and squat with different foot stances. Squat, you
Hmm.
know, box squats, which is basically touch down your butt to a different height,
Yeah.
object and stand up again. I'll have them do one-legged,
Hmm.
where I'll take my high-low table or a high box and I'll take it up high so that they're only squatting, maybe 8 inches. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not much. It's a small
No, it's
squat,
just a little
but they're able to
something.
go down and up on one foot. So that shows a lot more stability of the hip and the knee and the ankle and everything else. It's a great way to introduce a little bit of stability work, a little bit of balance work, but we're working on strengthening. And again, that is so important. And I hear from, I can't tell you how many of them say it transfers into activities of daily life.
Right.
Before they'd be walking and they'd make sure they go to a curb and make sure they'd go to the handicap portion where the wheelchair can go down, where it sort of dips toward, the curb dips down
Oh,
toward
yeah,
the
where it goes down.
same
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
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 They'd walk to that in order to walk across the street. And now they say, I don't even think about it. I just step up. I say, good. Yes, you're doing steps. This is
Yes.
functional, and step ups,
Yes.
incredibly functional.
Yep.
I've had clients move down to Florida and there's very little stairs in Florida. Everything is
Yeah.
flat.
Everybody's got a one room, one floor house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they come back up here and then they're like, stairs are hard. I'm out of breath. And I'm like, yeah, you got to start doing them again.
Uh-huh.
So these exercises, which may seem simple, especially when you're in your 30s or 40s, to us, how hard is it to do that? Not. But for some of our clients, it can be very challenging and they need to do it. They need to do it. I'm working with a gal who she's a Pilates instructor, and the stuff I'm teaching her, I teach her things that aren't Pilates related. Because guess what? I know this is stuff that's uncomfortable for her that she's not doing on her own. And I
Hmm.
push her to do these other things because it's like, look, I can have you do footwork. I can have you do all this stuff on the reformer. How about we use the reformer in ways you haven't before? How about we do push-ups off the foot bar? How about we do, and it's like, oh, that's hard. Bingo, ding, ding, ding. Let's challenge you a little bit. Let's do some body weights, that type of stuff. And it can make a huge difference.
So thinking about that, so I'm thinking through many clients in my head as you're talking through this. It's like I'm, running through my Rolodex of clients that I've worked with, and one of the things is just thinking where do we start? And for a lot of clients, for a lot of my clients, and I think of many of my clients were 50 and up. Like that was a pretty large portion of the demographic at my studio, and basically for a lot of them, Pilates was a really good baseline. Right. They started out doing Pilates and it was hard and then it got easier. Right. And they were able to do like a pretty good intermediate / maybe a few advanced exercises workout and feel pretty good with it. And for a lot of them, that was a good maintenance level. Right. And just in terms of keeping the body going, keeping the coordination going and the mobility, the complexity of Pilates is, I think, really helpful. Yes, you're not getting, a direct, bicep curl, getting my bicep stronger, but you're getting the whole body to work together. So, so sometimes like that can be great, especially for my older clients who've been sedentary. That can really keep their functional level pretty good. But to Brian's point, and how do we progress that? And a lot of that is looking at what are their functional capabilities, walking stairs, doing step ups, doing, the touch and goes, as I call them, or box squats, as you call them. Doing things where lifting stuff up. I like them to do some lifting things too, right?
Yes.
Because the lower body we work on, the lower body is great and critical, like quad and glute strength is critical to function. But I also want them to be able to kind of lean over, pick something up and do something with it, right? And Pilates doesn't train that well. That's not something that a lot of the exercises we do are going to address that. So I might say, okay, have like a 10-pound something on the floor. So go pick that up and put it over there. Go pick that up and put it over there. Yep. So it's how do you, and it's just body weight, it's functional movement. It's nothing particularly fancy. If you have access to a gym or you have access to other kinds of equipment where you can actually do some weightlifting, great. If you don't, then provide them with just functional activities that are useful for them.
Something that I have taught with and used for years, and this is coming from Hawaii, rice.
That's right. They're bag of rice. Brian's bag of
Bag of
rice. I
rice.
love this. It's great.
It works so well. It's a sandbag basically.
Yeah,
And what I
exactly.
like about it is you can fill it to whatever you want. You can put it in a Ziploc bag and tape the living daylights out of it just so it doesn't come open, or you can put it in something that's not going to spill. But what I like about it is it's movable. It
Yeah.
sort of flows with itself. So when you're grabbing it, you actually need to grip it. You need to use grip strength. I find
Mm-hmm.
that with dumbbells and handles, people aren't really gripping it that hard. They're sort of loose gripping things as they're holding. And while
Because
they're
they don't
getting
have
some
to.
forearm strength, they don't have to.
Yeah.
Whereas you use something that is going to, if you don't grip it, it's going to fall out of your hands. Well, guess what? You got to actually hold on to that thing. Sand bells are wonderful for that because they're filled with sand, right? I just use rice because cheap and easy. It's an easy way to add something in that you have to have them hold on to and grip. And like you said, find different weights, pick it up, move it across the room, put it down, go back, grab another one, and you do it. And then when you're there, yeah, bring it on back. I have a hallway outside. I have them do the hallway. I'll say, okay, walk over there, put it down. Now grab that other thing and bring it back over here. Now grab this and go back over there. And it's teaching them how to use their body in space, but it's
Yeah.
also getting them to be able to stabilize, hold something that may be an awkward size, an awkward shape,
Mm-hmm.
because that's so important. Because if everything is shaped like a kettlebell and it's very close and dense and you can hold it close to your body, it's a whole lot different than a big, huge medicine ball. I don't know if you remember these things. They're called ballast balls, and Bosu put them out
Yeah.
years and years ago. 9 pounds of sand was in them. They eventually reduced that to, I think, a pound and a half. But the 9 pound ones were actually really beneficial because they
Yeah.
were heavy and they're so big. And as you move it, the sand moved, and all of a sudden you have this unstable thing. Now they do things with water as well, which works great. The Surge, it's like a Viper
Mm-hmm.
with water inside. It's great because, again, it's unstable. You have to adjust your body as you're holding it, and you can adjust the level of water. You can do it with water jugs. There's a lot of cheap ways to do this, and it works really well. It works great for strength building, grip strength, which, like I say, you really need to work on as we get older because that's something that we lose, but also be able to carry, to move, to actually do work. A lot of people lose that.
And I want to just add on to that because I am now the proud great aunt of like 6 little ones, six down to pretty much newborn at this point. And man, you try to pick up a squirming 18-month-old, that's a dynamic load, just as let's take the female side of things, right? This is like the grandma side of things. And if you've got an older woman or older man, but older woman I think of a lot, who's taking care of a grandchild, like they've got a squirming dynamic load in their hands. And they've got to have a good grip on it because they can be wiggly little slippery things. And I just, I think about that every time because, they run up to me and jump on me basically. And I like pick them up and we play with stuff. And it's like, that's a very dynamic load. And so, like the sand bell or the Viper or even a water bottle that will, the sand, the water will move to one end or the other, creating a more dynamic load are all really just useful, simple ways to get some of the body's ability to manage unpredictable things and dynamic loads, which is what a lot of the world is about. We aren't always lifting something like a kettlebell. It weighs this much. I can hold on to it here. I put it there. Like that's great and that's fabulous, but there's a lot of things that are not like that in real life that we need to lift. I mean, even a wiggly grocery bag, sometimes it's like it shifts and it wobbles and it wiggles around. So
Yep. Something else to think about, and you're experiencing this. When the babies are young, the children are young, they're growing rapidly. So
yes,
grandma might see them every 3 months,
it's
4,
progressive
5,
weight.
6 months.
Yeah.
Well, that's just it. Is that kid can double in size in a
Yeah.
short amount of time. And so you really need to keep that in mind, that parents are lifting the same weight every day because they're growing, but they're growing in very small increments. We're talking about, quarter pound per day or
Yeah.
per week or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But to someone who doesn't see the child every day, it suddenly becomes a lot harder. And if
Yeah.
you haven't seen the child for a year and suddenly they go from 3 years old to 4 years old, that can be a huge difference. And now the kid still wants to be carried, and you're thinking, you're a giant. How am I supposed to carry you?
Exactly. Yes.
And you're wiggly, you're squirmy, and you're moving around. So it's something to think about when you're working with these clients, that you want something that has that dynamic load. It makes a difference. And to change the load up. Don't continue to do the same weight each week. I think we get very stagnant when we have the same client over and over and over again, week after week after week. Sometimes the weights, they go to a certain point and then they level off. Well, when they level off, you got to change something up. Unilateral, change the direction, change the type of weight, change something. Because if not, they're going to get efficient at it, and they may not gain a whole lot more strength very quickly like they did at the beginning. So we got to jazz it up a little bit and add some variety.
Yeah. And that's where creativity comes into play. Just variety. It can be the same thing they've been doing, even with the same weight, different movement pattern, right? Different number of reps, different way to do it, different time in the routine. A couple of things I wanted to mention was, you talked about grip strength, and I want to bring this up because this is one of my kind of Pilates pet peeves, if you will. In Pilates, I often find that people use they don't grip on, for example, to the foot bar. So if they're doing like a plank, so this would be, feet on the shoulder rest, hands on the foot bar, they usually have almost an open palm. So I'm using my mic as a visual, right? So like an open palm, and they're just kind of pressing all the pressure down onto their wrists. And there've been a lot of explanations for why this has come about. But in working with a lot of my clients, this happened years and years ago when I was teaching a reformer class to a bunch of IT people, basically. And they were all getting, elbow tendonitis because of the work that they do of various kinds. And I was like, okay, so I want you to change one thing. I'm going to have you grip that foot bar, and not necessarily with the thumb on the backside, but just grip that foot bar. So if we're doing a plank or we're doing something else, long stretch or whatever, grip that foot bar. Or knee stretch or whatever. I grip it, like wrap it around, and almost imagine you're gripping it and almost trying to pull it up. You're not, because, foot bars aren't always stable. So really adding that in, even when they're holding on to a bar to do like short box abdominals or on the trap table, like grip onto that bar. Don't just kind of give a half-assed sort of semi-connected feeling. And that made a huge difference. Honestly, within about a month, almost all their elbow tendonitis is cleared up. And a lot of just their forearm tendonitis just because they got stronger in their grip strength. So that's just a simple little thing I wanted to mention. The other thing is, and this is beyond our scope, but very important that they have this information from somebody who can tell them, is like protein is really critical at this point. Diet is really critical. This is not a good time to be eating crappy food. That will not help to build your strength. But again, that's something that I would send them to a nutritionist to work on their diet, and really get it organized for muscle building.
I was reading an article specifically for this about, is it possible to change a slow metabolism? They're talking about sarcopenia, and they're talking about especially aging, and that over 60 years of age, we really need to get them to think about protein first with the meal. And not only that, but increase the amount of protein that they're eating, because general recommended is 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. So if you're 100 kilograms, you eat 0.8 of that. So 80 grams is the bare minimum for a young person. Well, they're saying for an older individual over 60, 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram, which is you're talking about doubling it almost.
That's a lot more. It's a lot of protein eaten a day.
That's a lot more. And for someone like me who's been focused on protein since I was in my 20s, it's not a big deal. I eat protein, with everything, and it's natural. But for general population, that is not the norm. That is not the case. How many times I've talked to clients and said, "Oh, what have you had to eat today?" And they'll tell me their breakfast, they'll tell me their lunch, and I'll say, "Okay, what have you had that had protein in it?" Well, I had some milk. So yeah, lactose. Oats, that's a carbohydrate. How about more protein, pure, real, unadulterated protein? And you can see that they may not even know what a protein necessarily is. Right. And they may need guidance in just, okay, think about lean meats, think about, things like that. If they're vegetarian, get them to think more about getting complete proteins. It's really important for them to increase that, because as we see with our older people, I can't tell you how many times I've had to talk to them about protein drinks, just because they're not having, their meals have gotten much smaller. They're not eating as much protein in general. And they're
Yeah.
wondering why they're having a hard time gaining muscle.
Right.
So that's something that we can suggest. I mean, the literature's out there, and these are now recommended,
This is
allowances.
pretty
That
clear.
this is really clear. There's data
Yeah.
that says here's where they should be. And,
Yeah.
again, 100 kilogram, that's a 200-pound person, they need to be taking in 120 to 150 grams of protein. So you need to start getting them to think about that and spread out, not just having a huge steak for dinner.
Right. Exactly.
Through the
Then
day.
going to sleep on it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So no,
And
protein
that's,
is very
again,
important.
very important, and it's not necessarily part of our scope, but it is something you can certainly suggest. And then if they don't know what to do about that, the biggest challenge I've had is, I mean, I'm in California, I'm in the Bay Area, and particularly when I was younger, and when some of my clients were younger, I'd run into a lot of vegans, and these were vegans who were basically eating a lot of carbs. like when you talk to them about their diet, it was kind of like grains, a couple of beans, grains, and beans, and maybe some vegetables along in there. And they really were protein deficient, which, isn't always the case. Not every vegan is like that. A lot of them are very, very good about it. But this was, in 20s and 30s, and they're young and they can kind of manage whatever they need to manage. But that doesn't always work as somebody gets older, because there really is a lot of good research that says more protein is better as we age. Just helps keep our muscles going. So just something to think about there. And all those things, diet and nutrition, I find, can often be a real sticking point in discussing any of that with clients. So I'm always very, very delicate in my discussions with them, because I know I'm not a nutritionist, and everybody's got very firm beliefs. That's the other thing, is you're running into, when I talk about diet, I run into a lot of various versions of dogma that are, they are what they are. Belief systems are what they are. You can't always change somebody's belief system about something. But I can certainly just say, hey, the research seems to suggest this is a better idea. So you might want to think about it.
It's funny. I was two people. One, I was listening to a podcast, and the person who was the host of the podcast was saying that he was a vegan for 20 some odd years, complete vegan, 20, 25 years. And he was just feeling lousy. He just was, he had low energy. He was really overweight, and he could not figure out what was going on. And someone, a physician, basically said, knock it off, go and have some chicken, go and have some meat. And he was doing it for other reasons, but he said, I'll try anything. He would rather take a pill than make those changes, but he said, fine, I'll try it. He said, I've never felt as good as I did when I started adding in proteins again. And again, when you're doing it when you're in your 20s, it's a different story than when you're in your 50s. And I had a client who actually did that. We were talking, I guess I'd worked with her for 2 years already. And when she first came to me, she was vegan. And so I just kept that in the back of my head. We never talked about food very much. And she was talking about, she needed to gain some muscle and things. And I was like, well, we might want to think about increasing your protein, because as a vegan. And she goes, oh no, I stopped doing that a while ago and I feel a lot better. She did it on her own. I said, you do? She goes, oh yeah. She said, I don't eat a lot, but I feel a lot better. I said, well, okay, that's good. At least you recognized. And she said, oh yeah, there was something I was missing from my diet. And so just something to think about when talking to them. Like you said, there's a lot of dogma around different people's approach to doing it, and you don't want to get into that. But even making a suggestion that, this might be a good thing for you to try, or talk to a nutritionist about it, or your physician about this, especially if you're starting to lose muscle and we're not able to put muscle on you in a gym. There might be something missing that you're deficient.
Exactly. There may be a reason why you're not making gains and why you're not, improving.
Yeah.
So this is, yeah. This is one of those topics we sometimes walk ourselves into. There's a lot here, right? Like this is
Yeah,
actually
there is.
not that uncommon, and it's going to get more common with all the GLP-1 stuff and the rapid weight loss things. And if you
Yep.
work with an aging population, it's already there. You're already dealing with some of it, and you're also dealing with people. And I want to bring this up too, people who have been immobilized for a period of time, people, let's say, who've had surgery that has kept them in bed for a while. You'll at least have muscle atrophy, if not sarcopenia. And I've also had clients with things like cancer treatment, which
Yeah.
has really changed their physiology, and sometimes that can lead to sarcopenia as well. So it's just something to be aware of, and something that, like, we're the first line on that, because
Yep.
we're the ones who are going to be helping them build muscle. Their nutritionist is going to do that. Their doctor isn't going to do that. The other people they're working with, their oncologist or whatever, isn't going to do that. We're the ones who actually are on that front line. And the best thing we can do is just, like we always do, support them, give them simple stuff to do, have them come in as often as they can for you, give them some good homework that
Yep.
matches their lifestyle and their ability to do stuff.
Yep.
And then also just remember, just kind of keep pushing them and keep trying to move them forward in terms of resistance or challenge. So don't get complacent. Don't say, oh, this is good enough. Let's keep pushing them a bit. And it means you got to be
Yeah.
a little more of a taskmaster than you might naturally be.
And let's give you guys some parameters, some very specifics that you can do with the clients. Multi-joint exercises are usually going to be the best. So things like squats, rows, presses, things like that are going to hit more than one muscle group at a time.
Yep.
Doing
Everything
strength
in the
training.
Pilates environment, more or less, just
Yeah,
to say, like, that's
exactly. But
Pilates does that. Yeah.
under additional resistance
Mhm.
is the key for this. 1 to 3 sets. And you want to work anywhere from like 8 to 15 repetitions. And again, if they're able to do 15 reps, time to go up in weight. I mean, it goes
Yeah.
back to some of those old philosophies, but it still works. You're able to do 15 reps, take the weight up a little bit, go back down to 8 reps, and work your way up slowly but surely. They're going to get stronger. Again, 2 to 3, maybe even 4 days a week if they can. If you can get them to do it on their own, I've got a few people that I give them the homework and have them do some of these exercises, standing up and sitting down. You can hold something, you can hold a water bottle. There's other ways to add resistance. These are all ways to do that. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is something that goes a lot of times people don't think about, this is power training. Now, I'm not
Mm.
talking about going out there and lifting, trying to get them to, go to Olympic gym or do CrossFit or any of that. We're talking about speed. We're talking about adding some speed to something like standing up and sitting down. So they sit down regularly, but stand up quickly. So they're working more on speed, because guess what? I learned this a long time ago. I worked with a woman. Her name was Mrs. Ritchie. No relation to me. She was 96 years old when I started working with her. Uh, on the frail side, she took a fall and became incredibly more frail. And at 98, it took her to get out of a chair about 15 to 20 seconds. She was that slow. So standing up and sitting down was very frustrating to do 10 repetitions because it took forever. And one day I literally told her, I said, I want you to jump up out of your chair. She goes, what? Her eyes got really big. And I said, I want you to go as fast as you can. I said, I got you. I'm right here. Nothing's going to happen to you. I promise you. Go up as quickly as you can. And what she did, she stood up straight. Boom. She just stood up. And in her mind, though, she jumped. But to me, it looked like a normal person getting out of a chair.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
after that, I was like, ding, 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 ding. For her, that was very important. So doing things with a little bit more speed under safe environment. So maybe when I'm using a tube or something and doing presses, I may have someone do them a little bit faster. I'll say, okay, now pretend you're punching, and I'll give them a target with my hand and say, okay, I want you to lightly, increase your speed, and I'll take their resistance down a little bit. So working on that speed can really begin to help change that a little bit in their body so that they can move a little faster. And you're going to see their gait speed will increase. Things like that. And you'd think it's not hard to do, but it's important to do.
And I think one of the challenges in the Pilates environment is speed is a little funny when you're working with
Mm.
springs. You can certainly do molasses, and there's a lot of, molasses tempos are very, very slow and concentrated, which is great for focusing. But I do work a lot with, let's vary the rhythm, let's vary the tempo. So even footwork, if you do wah da 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 da, like you really can't do power like you can when you're jumping on the jump board, for example. But when you're just doing like footwork, you push off and the springs just kind of go boing and you kind of come back in. It doesn't really work that well with spring resistance. But you can certainly speed up the tempo of a lot of things. Still maintaining what I would suggest in the Pilates environment is maintaining the resistance on the springs as you go through it. So how fast can you go while maintaining the resistance on the springs rather than kind of pushing and then slamming and pushing and slamming. So you can certainly find that connection all the way through. And that's a really nice way to start to work on that. And then I also do, like Brian does, getting up and down off the reformer. Just sit down, get up, sit down, get up, sit down, get up. Okay, go faster, 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 faster. Simple stuff like that. Just to get them moving. I like that. That tempo is really important, actually, because people can get very, I feel like everybody's nervous system has a rhythm to it. And especially as people get older, that rhythm kind of starts to slow down. And sometimes if you can just, like, I love what you just said, just ask them to go faster, it helps to get things firing a little more, gets them more reactive. And that's important for life too. Life doesn't always come at you at a snail's pace. Your dog jumps under your feet, or you step off a curb funny, or you slip on ice, all those things. Like, you got to be able to respond quickly enough to keep yourself from falling.
There is something called a quick step, which you can do as a test for your clients. And basically that is, you have them feet together and have them lean forward and have them keep leaning until they have to take that step. How quickly they can take that step is a reaction time test. And it's really an important thing to think about, because if they do slip on the ice, guess what? Most older people don't even know it until they've hit the ground. Their body and their reaction time is so slowed. And what I see them do is they lean forward, and before they've even, it doesn't even look like they've broken that, that vertical plane. They're taking the step forward already. Instead of, okay, lean, boom, move that foot quick, move that foot quick. Even just getting them to do that can be a huge thing, because it teaches reaction time. It speeds that up. And I'll put things on the floor. I have colored dots. You can get these on Amazon. They're cheap. I have colored dots, and I'll call out a color. And I don't care if they use their right foot or left foot sometimes. Sometimes I'll say right red, left green. So they have to think about it and move with that foot. But I'm trying to work on speed as well, because I want them to go a little bit faster. And an exercise I give them for home, it's called a speed squat. And all it is, literally, they start doing regular squats up and down. I say, I don't care how low you go, it doesn't matter. Now I want you to go a little bit faster. Now a little bit faster. Now a little bit faster. Until I say, you're going as fast as you feel comfortable doing. I don't want you out of control. I don't want you feeling like you're going to fall over or anything, but go as fast as you feel comfortable going. And you do this with a 20-year-old, and they're going, boop, 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 boop. You do it with a 60-year-old, they're going, boop, 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 boop. But they're, in their mind, they're going quick. They're going fast. Over a 6-month period, guess what? You're going to see that speed increase. So these are all functional things that you can do with your clients. And that's why I wanted to give you some kind of a practical application as well. Here are some activities that you can give to your clients that work really well for teaching them those things, for getting them to be more powerful. Because again, reaction time, slipping on ice is a huge one. Or just, falling in general. How many of us have just leaned, funny, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, and you have to take that step to the side to catch yourself. Well, if you don't have that quick reaction time, you're on the ground. So that's something to think about. Teaching that power and that speed and that quickness really can be beneficial for fall prevention.
Absolutely. So there's are we wrapping?
Yeah.
I feel like we're wrapping.
I think we're wrapping it up. So it feels like it. No, this is good. This is good. I think we covered a lot of things, and I think we gave a lot of practical application as well, whether they are on GLP-1s, whether they do have a client who's lost a lot of weight, or they have an older client, and this is either preventative or trying to get that strength and that muscle back. These are all great things that they can do on a regular basis with these clients.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty simple, pretty easy to do. Don't require a lot of fancy equipment.
No.
You know, Pilates environment. Don't forget standing is my major thing in the Pilates environment. Don't forget some squats and some other things. Make sure that
Yep.
you're taking all that beautiful work you're doing and transferring it to standing and to
Yep.
functional moves, because that's sometimes a weak spot for us in Pilates, and I want to make sure that things are translating.
Yep. Yep. Well, good. I think we hit all the points we wanted to cover. We appreciate every one of you for listening this week. Really do appreciate it. And you can always check us out at Moving Combos on Instagram. We put a lot of videos and things on there, so check it out. We have our Anatominis. We also have our Moving Conversations sort of live version, so to speak, where we'll cover some of the exercises that we may have talked about in some of the podcasts. So you can go back in the archives and check that out as well. If there's something that interests you about a certain body part or something that we've covered, check it out in the archives. And do hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Every comment, every share that you give us, we really appreciate it. It comes in handy for those algorithms. You can always reach us at movingcombos@gmail.com. That's the best way to get in touch with us. And for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.